Welcome to the Chapter 4, Section 3 podcast. And this podcast is on biomes. And first of all, what a biome is. Biome is a complex of terrestrial communities that covers a large area and is characterized by certain soil and climate conditions and particular assemblages of plants and animals. And the big thrust of this chapter is we're going to look at all these different biomes you can see by the colors, and we'll see this map again, and we're going to talk about what makes one biome different from each other and why certain organisms are found here and not there. So first thing we need to talk about, this goes back to a little bit later in the year when we talk about genetics, and we're going to talk about variations in plants and animals, and name things like height, how resistant it is to drought, color, things like that. And these the variations can help in an animal's tolerance or the ability to survive and reproduce under conditions that differ from their optimal conditions. These organisms right here, these plants right here, are not getting enough water. They're showing drought tolerance right now, and the fact that they are able to withstand having less water than optimal allows them to survive. So, climate. Climate is one of the big factors in determining what organisms can survive there and can't survive there. And you can have differences within a biome, just over a small difference. And these climate in a small area that differs from the climate around it is called a microclimate. And I chose these two pictures. This is San Francisco, California, which has a much warmer, a very strange climate. Its cold season seems to be in the summer. I remember watching San Francisco Giants baseball games, and it seemed like it was like 40 degrees there or something. And this here is a place in England that has tropical plants. It's on a preserve, and it's situated in such a way that its climate helps it grow rainforest plants. And there's some ferns here. Very strange. So those are examples of microclimate. Ordinarily, these things would not be able to grow here, and ordinarily, San Francisco's weather would be a lot different than what it is. So, we talk about climate. We're talking specifically about temperature and precipitation, and this is a climate diagram, which you probably have seen in class. This bottom area of the diagram shows us the precipitation. We use this axis right here, and this axis right here is for temperature, and here's the temperature range right here for New Orleans in on that axis right there. So let's go through the biomes. There are 10, and I have been to actually 8 of these biomes. In my travels, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to travel over the last few years, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about them, but you're going to see these all in a few minutes again. So there they are, the 10. So what are the unique characteristics of the world's major biomes? So once again, we're talking about the abiotic factors, which are particularly climate, and we're also talking about the plants and animals that you see in the biomes. Here's a map of the biomes, and this map will be worth you coming back to at some point, looking at it again, and you're going to see that there are some consistencies with it. You can see wherever we have polar ice caps, you're going to have tundra, and then after bordering on the tundra is then going to be the boreal forest of the taiga. You'll also see that you're going to see deserts near tropical savannas, which are going to be near tropical dry forests, which are then going to be near tropical rainforests. So you start to see patterns here. You can see this band of colors repeating itself somewhat over here in Australia. You can see the band with the tundra, the taiga, repeating itself in North America and in Northern Europe. There are one biome which we're not going to really talk too much. Well, we'll talk briefly, which is the mountains and the ice caps, and you can see here is Antarctica and you can see you have ice caps here in Greenland. One more thing I want to point out, I think it's really worth it, is look at the United States. We have, I believe it's 5 biomes here. This is the temperate forest, which is where New York is located. We have the temperate grasslands, which stretch to the middle of our country, the breadbasket of our country. We have a desert here out in New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada and Utah. We have temperate woodland and shrubland here and here. That looks like probably in Colorado, and that's in Southern California there. And then up in the corner you have the northwestern coniferous forest, which is where the redwoods are up in Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and I guess if you count Alaska, you have the tundra and the taiga there. So let's go through them. Let's stop at the tropical rainforest. And the tropical rainforest is where you're going to have many species. It has more species than all the other biomes combined. And part of what makes the rainforest unique is the tall trees that are in the rainforest that are extending 50 to 80 meters above this floor, and it's very dense. This dense covering we call a canopy. Here's a good picture of it. And then underneath there's a second layer, which we call the understory, and these are the shorter trees and vines underneath that canopy in the tropical rainforest. And the anything that falls to the floor is quickly decomposed and recycled. So this is very fertile ground for the organisms there. However, the soil itself is actually pretty thin and pretty poor, and it's hot and wet all year round. And here are just some of the other plants there. I was in a tropical rainforest in Costa Rica, and I got to see these climbing plants and these vines and the ferns and these really gigantic trees down there. And I also got to see some of these animals too. I did not get to see a jaguar, but I did get to see a sloth, and I did get to see all kinds of frogs, and I did get to see a lot of these things: toucans, parrots, monkeys, butterflies, capybaras. I got to see a lot of these animals down there, and once again I saw it down in Central America. Tropical dry forest. Now this is nearby. Your rainfall is going to be highly seasonal. It's going to be you're going to have the trees drop their leaves just like we do, but that's for the dry season, not because it's cold. It's to conserve water. Trees that drop their leaves are called deciduous, and we know we have deciduous trees here in the Northeast. And once again, warm all year round. You have wet and dry seasons, and you also have rich soils there, but they will erode. Tall deciduous trees, things that are drought tolerant, aloes, succulents, and I got an opportunity to go to a dry forest in Mexico, and kind of things you're going to see there is tigers and monkeys. This sounds like India here, and these are the organisms that you're going to find there. There we go, there's India. And I got a chance to go to a tropical dry forest in Mexico, and I guess I probably was in one when I was in Costa Rica too. Tropical savanna. I was very fortunate to go to tropical savanna in Tanzania. This is a very dry area, not as dry as a desert, but drier than the tropical forest. There's lots of grasslands. This is very typical. You have these trees here out in the middle of nowhere. You have your wildlife, and then you have these large, gigantic stretches of grasslands. And I didn't see any fires there, but I know they do. And there's constantly animals eating everything, so it's very hard for a forest to occur. Here's great. Here's that looks like a baobab tree, which is a typical tree. And here you have gazelle and some more zebra. Very warm. Seasonal rainfall, not much rainfall. And like I said, grasses. and drought tolerant and fire resistant trees and shrubs, because fire is a big factor there. And here you go, this is a African safari. I saw all these things. I don't think there's a single thing on there I didn't see when I had an opportunity to go to Africa. My favorite, of course, is the hyenas. They were amazing. But I mean, zebras are like, I don't know, they're like robins here. They're everywhere. So, and of course I got to see it in Eastern Africa and Tanzania. Deserts, I've been fortunate to been to a desert. They're dry, obviously. The amount of precipitation is the defining factor. Extreme temperature changes, I experienced that when I was out west. During the day, it would get up to 95, actually it was 102 once when we were out in Moab, Utah. And then that evening it was probably down in the 50s. We were in sleeping bags that night. And so obviously there are extreme conditions in this case, both water and heat. So once again, low precipitation, big ranges in temperatures. Saw a lot of cacti there, obviously. Dominant wildlife. I saw coyotes. A lot of these things that we saw out there while we were out west. And we were out I went there in the United States, out in the American West. Temperate grasslands, I've been there too. I've driven through Iowa. The temperate and actually in Montana, I was in temperate grassland too in Montana. Rich mix of grasses, fertile soils. This is the breadbasket of the United States. You're going to have heavy grazing by large herbivores such as bison. Warm to hot summers, probably a little bit hotter than here. Cold winters, probably a little colder than here. They get enough rain for the grasslands to work. Fertile soils, that's probably the big factor right there. So you have perennial grasses, which means they come back year after year, and they're resistant to drought, fire, and cold. You have your coyotes, your badgers, your antelopes, rabbits, prairie. Here's a prairie dog right here. Here's a prairie chicken right there. So, and this is going to be in North America. Basically for us, it's going to be in the central United States, the Midwest. Temperate woodland and shrubland. Now this is an interesting one. You have semi-arid, which means it's going to be a little on the dry side. Shrub communities, and you have a lot of oak trees. This is an area outside Los Angeles where I've also been to. And this is where you have an area like that with all the shrubs. It's called a chaparral, and this is interesting too. The low plants have a lot of flammable oils, and you've probably read about the fires out in Los Angeles that are constantly threatening the communities out there. And this is part of the reason. Now this is in Portugal here. This is a cork tree here, and this is kind of a typical see little shrubs and some trees here, and that's typical of this biome. Woody evergreens, and and here's your dominant wildlife there. These are all things you'd probably find out in Southern California. And also in the Mediterranean, I mentioned Portugal. Portugal and Spain have this area. West coast of North America is where I've been. Temperate forest. So here's another. Temperate forests contain a mixture of deciduous. Now we talked about deciduous. They lose their leaves. Coniferous have cones with seeds in it, and they have needle-shaped leaves. Think pine tree. Think a pine tree. Cold winters and that whole plant growth for several months. That's what's happening. That's what happens every year to us out here in our temperate forest. We have trees that shed their leaves. The deciduous trees shed their leaves in fall, and it's and because of all this decaying matter, we have a lot of humus. So we have very fertile soil. And this would be us right here: year-round precipitation, cold to moderate winters, warm summers. And this is basically where we are right here. And here's our dominant wildlife. We have, if you ever go out to northwestern New Jersey, where my in-laws live, you have tons of white-tailed deer. Black bears are always harassing my father-in-law, getting into his garbage. And turkeys, I see them every year when I go out to my in-laws. I always see turkeys out there. And this is the eastern United States. This is really where we are. We're in a temperate forest. Now, the one spot in the continental United States I've been to, the northwestern coniferous forest. And this is mild, moist air, and I chose this picture because it had a lot of fog in it. So abundant rainfall. Think Seattle, think Washington, think Oregon, think Northern California. But Seattle is famous for its rainfall. Variety of trees. There's your giant redwoods. They're in there. And it's sometimes called a temperate rainforest, which is an alternate name for the northwestern coniferous forest. So you have mild temperatures, plenty of precipitation in the fall, winter, and spring. Cool, dry summers. There you go. Douglas fir, spruce, western hemlock, redwood. Here's your wildlife. You have elk. You have black bears, beavers, owls, bobcats. Oregon State are known as the beavers. There you go. And this is in the Pacific coast of the northwestern United States and Canada. This is very unique to North America, strictly to United States and Canada. Now, the boreal forest. I have been to a boreal forest, although I didn't really realize it was a boreal forest. They're also known as the taiga. Very, very cold winters. And let me explain. I've been to Newfoundland, and Newfoundland's a strange place in that it's an island, and it was at one point just rocky, but its weather makes it more of a boreal forest than anything else. So you have mild and long enough to allow the ground to thaw. I was there in the summer. It was beautiful there in summer. It reminded me of Maine. And it's mostly in the northern hemisphere. And you'll see those up in Russia too. There's a taiga in Russia. Long cold winters, short mild summers. Not very good soil. I remember it being acidic soil. Remember that. We saw tons of coniferous trees. And oh yeah, lots of berries. Lots of berry shrubs. We saw those too. And these are your dominant wildlife: lynxes, timber wolves, weasel family. This makes me think of Minnesota, but I know Minnesota, I think, is technically a temperate forest, but I bet it borders on being a taiga. And here's the tundra. Now, this is just before we get to the polar ice cap. So you have what's called a permafrost. It's a permanently frozen subsoil, and you can imagine that has consequences for any kind of plant life. So the ground thaws only to a few centimeters, soggy and wet, and then it freezes again. You have high winds, so you can see here we don't have many tall plants here. It's a very short growing season. You can see there's a lot of lichens here, very low ground covering life. Ground hugging, there you go. Ground hugging plants, mosses, lichens, short grasses. You can see that right there. It's the tundra. And you're going to find things like Arctic foxes and caribou up there. Migratory waterfowl, think Canadian geese there. And this we find in North America. I think the very top of Canada. I think the very northern parts of Russia for Asia and Europe. Probably some of the Scandinavian countries. And here they talk about other places that don't fit neatly into any of the Earth's biomes. And they're talking about it varying with elevation. Here's a picture of a nice mountain. As you go higher up, things become colder as you go higher in elevation, and your amount of precipitation increases as you move from the base of the summit. That's why we have these snow-capped peaks. One of the reasons why we have lots of snow-capped peaks. And you're going to see a large variety of organisms between down here at the base of the mountain and near the top, because the conditions change so rapidly. So polar ice caps, they're cold all year round. You have the sea ice and ice cap. Excuse me. You can see the plant life is similar to the taiga. Here's our polar bears and seals. In the south polar area, you have ice down there, and you have a lot of penguins down there. And look how thick this ice gets. 5 kilometers thick. That's like that's 3 miles. 3 miles thick. That's amazing. So on to the quiz.